All right, so as I kind of mentioned briefly in the pre-lecture discussion, um, today is about front end. And so the main stuff we're going to be learning about is HTML, CSS, and kind of the role of JavaScript. But we'll really talk more about JavaScript on Thursday. HTML and CSS are going to be the big focuses for today. First, I want to talk briefly about the big picture for the next 8 lectures. So these next 8 lectures are majority new content for CS196. We want to teach you all how to kind of throw together a basic website. And so these first 2 lectures are going to be on front-end development. Then we're going to have 2 kind of interlude lectures in between where we'll teach regex and debugging, I believe. And then the next 4 lectures after that will be on back-end development, 2 of those, and then 2 on databases. And so after that, it's really our hopes that you'll kind of have an understanding of everything that's going on when you load up a website from beginning to end. And most importantly, you'll kind of be able to do this yourself if you want to. I hope projects are going well. Sprint 1 has ended this past weekend. I hope all of you have gotten your MVPs in. I've taken some time and checked a few of them out, and they're super cool, and I'm very excited. That includes my groups. I'm excited for everything. Social hours are going to be after this lecture. I just want to remind everyone about these social hours. We run them after most lectures, but the time is kind of variable, just depending on when you need them. We really do hold these social hours for you all, and so whatever you want to do during them, whenever you want them to be, it's up to you. We know that COVID has made the meeting your fellow classmates aspect of life a little bit hard, and I and a lot of the other staff think that that's a really important part of being a college student. And so CS196 wants to do what we can to try to provide that. And historically, the social hours have been an awesome way to meet a ton of friends who, you'll be great friends with in the future. So, I really do encourage you, if that sounds like your thing, to come join. They're super fun. They're super low pressure. We're not talking about homework in there. So, if you're interested, come join. So we'll get right into it. So for the next 2 lectures, we're going to be talking about what is front end. Okay, so the front end is anything that the user of your website interacts directly with, and we're going to split these into kind of 3 major categories: is what the website says, how the website looks, and what the website does. In practice, though, front end can be a wide range of topics, going from user interface, user experience, all of the JavaScript magic that goes behind so many things nowadays. But for our purposes, I'm going to help teach you how to go from this to this. And so let's break this down a little bit more. So when we say what the website says, or the words on the page, that's usually referring to HTML. HTML we'll talk about we'll talk about all of these in a little bit. When we're talking about how the website looks, how things are laid out, the color of things, the font size of things, all of that, that's going to be the CSS. And then when we're talking about what the website does, so when you click a button, what takes you to another page, or well, I should say more specifically, when you click a button, some event might happen on the page. That's usually going to be JavaScript. So we'll start first with HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It defines the structure, the elements, and the content of those elements in the web page. It's the standard for viewing web pages, and so all of your browsers recognize HTML files as this thing that we see as a web page. A lot of people like to talk about whether or not HTML is a language or not. It is a markup language. It is not a programming language. HTML does not run. You can run a program in Python. You can run a program in Java. You cannot run a program in HTML because HTML is really more similar to a text file, right? It's just kind of content. So let's talk about the basics of HTML. HTML uses these things called tags and uses these tags to build elements. And so in this very basic example here, we can see some of these tags. We see HTML head, title, title, head, body, body, HTML, right? And so the tags that we're seeing here are the HTML tags, the head tags, the title tags, and the body tags. We open tags by putting it in the caret braces. I'm not actually sure the correct name for those now that I think about it. Well, we open tags by putting them in those brackets, and then we close tags by putting them in brackets preceded by a forward or a slash. The combination of an open and closed tag make up the element. So if we look at line 3 here, we have an entire title element made up of the title tag, the content of the element, and then the closing title tag. It seems like my stream is still good. Just let me know if anything happens with that, everybody, okay? So again, HTML uses tags to build elements, and the content goes in the middle. Looking here again, we have a tag for body. The content goes in the middle, right? All of these HTML pages have a core which you build off of. And so all HTML pages need first an HTML element, a lot of L's in there, and that goes around everything. It needs angle brackets. Yeah, okay, thank you. It needs a head element, which goes at the top of the HTML element, in the content of it though. And it needs a body element, which goes after the head element in the HTML. And so looking here on the right, you can see the structure of this. You have HTML, start head, start body, end body, HTML. So what goes in the HTML element? Literally everything. Everything goes in the HTML element. Anytime you're writing HTML, everything needs to go into the HTML element, except for a single thing that usually gets auto-generated, so you don't need to worry too much about it. I won't get into that because it's kind of just like nitty-gritty details. So what goes into head element? Metadata. Metadata is data about the HTML document, but things that aren't necessarily displayed to the user. And so stuff like this is the page title. So when you have the tab, the title on that tab, the style, so linking to CSS or writing directly CSS in the head, linking to other files, which are often CSS, the author of the page, description of the page, keywords on the page, as well as linking to scripts, which are usually JavaScript. All of those things go in the head element. And then, kind of more importantly, the body element. So what goes in the body element? Everything else. Anything that you want the user to see and anything that helps structure the web page goes in the body element. And so you don't normally, when you're writing HTML, most of your web page is made up by this body element. And of course, everything the user sees is made up of the body element. Inside of this body element, we use many, many different tags in order to describe and organize the content how we want it. And we're going to introduce a few key concepts and a few key tags first. But one thing that I want to preface before we even start talking about this is we don't expect you to memorize these. When in doubt, Google it. HTML is a web development language. The idea that you wouldn't be able to use the web as a resource is a little maybe hypocritical. I'm not really sure what to call it, but please Google it. There's tons and tons of awesome resources online. Okay, so let's introduce some key concepts. Elements come in two types: inline and block. Inline elements do not start a new line, and block elements do start a new line on the HTML page, on the actual page that is rendered, I should say. Content always goes inside of the tags, as we saw before, and the content can be elements, text, or both. And so in our previous example, for this, we'll look here. The HTML element has other elements inside of it, the head element and the body element, and those can have elements inside of them. The head element, for example, has title. When you're doing the homework, we expect you to use Google. W3 Schools and the MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, I believe, are two awesome resources that you can use. So please use Google. Please learn to do things. And in fact, we even have some opportunities during lecture to use Google. So let's briefly talk about some of the basic tags. I'm just going to introduce a few here. Again, don't worry about memorizing these. I do want you to memorize 2 of them at the end, and we'll use those a lot, so you'll memorize them very fast. So the P tag is very basic. It's the paragraph tag, and you use it for text. It's a block element, so if I put another P tag or P element after this hello world, it would be on a new line, and so it would say hello world, new line, hello world. We have the H1 through H6 tags, which are used for different headings. Each one of these is kind of for a different level of importance. And so we can look here, we'll make a header for each one, and we can see as we go down the headers, it gets smaller and smaller, kind of representing that each header is less important than the least. This is kind of one of the big ones, the A tag or the anchor tag. We use these for links, and they use this thing called the href attribute to define where the link goes. And these links can also go within your site as well. So if you want to go from my URL to myurl.aboutus, that's the way to do it. So let's look at an example of the h tag here. We have a tag. We have href equals, and then the URL you want it to go to. So let's talk about what that href equals is. This is a thing called an attribute. Some tags need attributes to function. You can think of these a little bit like parameters to a function in actual programming languages. And most attributes are specific to a tag. And so, for example, we saw that the a tag has the href attribute. Href, in case you're wondering, stands for hypertext reference, and that references you to another hypertext page or just to another HTML page. When in doubt, we don't expect you to memorize what attributes to use. Google it. Let's talk about another one. We have the image. And so if you want to insert an image into your web page, one of the main ways to do that is using the image element or the image tags. Similarly, these use the src attribute to choose the image. But one difference with these is there's no actual content of the image. It's just the image itself. And so these are what you call auto-closing. And so you actually don't need a closing tag. You just kind of put / angle bracket at the end there. I believe in certain versions you could put in a closing image tag. I think if you start to put content in between the image tags, you start to have some trouble, though. Yeah, style guide errors, I believe. Let's talk about two really important ones, and you can see I put a little bit of a golden border around these two because these are very important, and those are div and span. And so they're very similar. They are just an arbitrary division of your information. And most importantly, they can be styled using CSS to look like whatever you want. If you want a div to look like an h1 tag, it can look like an h1 tag. If you want it to have a neon green background and neon pink text, you can do that. This is a really popular choice for nesting elements because they are kind of shapeless and you can make them into whatever you want. Similarly, the span tag is basically the exact same as the div tag, except it's inline. Again, you can make these into whatever you want, and they're a popular choice for inline styling. So maybe you want to make only a certain word, italics or bold or the color green. The span tag is usually the fastest way to do that. Let's talk about two special attributes that most elements can use, and you're going to be using very, very often when we talk about divs and spans, and that is the ID attribute and the class attribute. An HTML element can have both or one or neither of these. And these two attributes are the way that we can link CSS with HTML a lot easier. And so for ID, these must be unique, and it has to be one word. And so for class, they must be unique, but you can have multiple words, so you can say class equals my space class. And what that'll do is it's the same as saying the my class and the class. So let's look at an example here. We'll use divs, we'll nest our divs, and we'll say outside div with the ID outside div. And we'll give these a class, red, blue, red, blue. Again, you can have multiple divs or multiple elements with the same class, but each ID has to be unique. It must be unique. And so when we want to actually adjust, let's say we want all of these divs to be red and all of these divs to be blue, right? We want the red class to be red and the blue class to be blue. Well, we're going to use CSS for this, and this describes how HTML elements should be displayed. Okay, I don't mean to be finicky. Technically, you can have an if attribute. HTML itself is not Turing complete, so it is not a programming language. With CSS, it is, and with compilers like Angular, which is JavaScript, and of course JavaScript is Turing complete. And so once you start to link other stuff in there, it becomes Turing complete. What you're talking about, I believe, is templating, which we're going to talk about next lecture. Raw HTML, though, is definitely not a programming language, but good question. So CSS describes how HTML elements should be displayed. It is possible that newer versions of HTML have an if, but I haven't heard of it. It would have to be very new. Anywho, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it describes how HTML elements should be displayed. And if you remember, this is the how it looks. So how useful is CSS? Let's say we have some HTML page here that looks like this, and this has no CSS at all, absolutely nothing. Well, using only CSS, not changing the HTML at all, we can make it look like this, or we can make it look like this, right? And you can make it look like infinite other things too. But the important thing to note here is that CSS gives you the power to lay these things out however you want. Different font color, different font type, sidebar styles, font size, all of that is in your control, and CSS is the way to do it. Okay, so how do we actually write CSS? It follows this structure. And so you write a selector, is what we call it. And then in between curly braces, you write attribute value pairs. So selector, attribute value, a different attribute and maybe a different value, a different selector, a different attribute, a value, attribute value. You guys get it. So let's look at an example. The three major things that you can use selector for in CSS, and there's more, but the three big ones you're going to be using are selecting elements like divs, h2s, span tags, whatever you want, classes, which is anything with the class equal to some class, and IDs, which is something, again, a single element that says ID this specific element. And so for elements, all we have to do is say, tag name. So div h2, nothing fancy about it. You just type the tag that you want right there. No angle brackets, nothing. For classes, we prefix the class name with a period. So you have dot some class, and then you'd write all of the attributes you want to edit in there. And then finally, for IDs, you prefix it with a pound sign, hashtag, whatever you want to call it. And you can chain these together. And so if we want to select all of the divs with the class some class, which one of these should we use? This would be a great time to get the bot running. Oh. I opened my phone and Discord crashes immediately. Please? Okay. Let's check pollbot. Oh. Is the bot alive right now? Also, the 15-minute timer did not keep my headphones alive. Oh. I see what I did wrong. Okay, apologies for the slight delay. Check pollbot now, and we should see, yep, there we go. So go ahead and react to that for this poll. Which one of these is correct? If we want to write our selector to select all div elements with the class some class, what should we use? All the div elements with the class some class. I'll hop back to this one for a sec, just for all of you to look at. Div elements with the some class, was it some class? Yeah, some class class. Okay, we'll just give this one more minute here. I see some people are still answering. Maybe 10 more seconds. 10, 9, as long as 10 seconds. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right, I see most of you got this right. Probably should have swapped back to the actual answers so that people could see those. It is in fact 3, so it's div.someClass. Div, again, we want to select first the divs, and then we want to select the someClass class. Some people put 4. This is incorrect because it starts with the dot, and the div is an element, not a class. Okay, so let's say we want to set all of our divs to have big text with the console font. How do we do this? Well, we say div, and then we use these attribute value pairs. And again, I want to reiterate this. Do not try to memorize these. There are so many CSS attribute value pairs. I don't think anybody in the entire world knows them all. So don't try to memorize them all, just Google it. I would Google here how to make text bigger in CSS. And I would see font size, and then 20 points is, I think, a good one. And then for the font family, we'll use Courier New because I'm pretty sure that looks like what we want. So we'll run this, and we see that it actually didn't work. That font size is not very big, and it is not the console font. So what happened? What went wrong? Well, we didn't actually include the CSS in the HTML, right? The HTML needs to know that it is using the CSS, and so there's two major ways: internal CSS, excuse me, internal CSS and external CSS. There's a third way called Inline Css. If you know what this is, then you know you really shouldn't use it. So I'm not going to teach it to you because you shouldn't use it. If you're interested, Google Inline Css and don't use it, please. I beg you. Internal CSS is when we put the style tag in the head element. Inside of these style tags, we're free to write CSS normally. And so another way to word this is inside of the style element, in the head element, we can write CSS as the content of the style element. But more simply, in the style tags, write CSS. And it's automatically applied to the HTML page that you're writing it in. For external CSS, you can use the link tag or link element to link the CSS file to include it. Link has two attributes, href, which is the location of the CSS file, and rel, which tells the HTML file that it's a CSS file. And so we'll look at the first one, doing internal. We can see here, we can see here in the head tag, we have a style tags. And in the style tags, we write it like normal. And it's the same stuff as before, font size 20. I actually changed the font because I got the font wrong the first time. But this one's correct, and that's what you need to know. And we can see this worked. We have the correct font. The font size is a little bit bigger. Life is good. Let's look at the second way. And so we'll say link rel equals style sheet, again, telling the HTML document that this is a CSS file. Href equals demo.css. And we'll look at the directory here. We can see index.html is what we're working in. Demo.css is the adjacent file, or in the same directory. And we can see it worked here as well. So let's say we want to get a little fancier with this, and we want to set everything with the red class to have the red background, and everything with the blue class to have the blue background. So this is what we'll do. I just spoiled it. This is what we'll do. First person to tell me what goes inside of these blocks gets 5% extra credit on this homework. I encourage you to use Google. So if we want the red class to have the red background and the blue class to have the blue background, what should we put here? What goes under the gray rectangles? I did accidentally hit forward, so there was like one frame that you could have read it in, and if you saw it in that time, very nice. Very nice. So we got background color, and that is correct. So DM me to remind me after the lecture, and you get 5%. There's another opportunity for extra credit, so don't worry, all of you who were not able to get it. They're also exempt from being able to earn the extra credit otherwise. So very nice. So background color goes here. Again, pretty easy. Just Google it. Is the number one thing to do. And so we can see, we're still linking the thing in using the link tags. This works wonderfully. The red class has red backgrounds. The blue class has blue backgrounds. Life is good. Okay. This is really kind of the bread and butter of this lecture. This is what I've been speed running towards. And so what I want to do here is go from, as we talked about in the beginning, a drawing of a website to a fully functional website together. And so I want to go through all those steps together so we can learn. So first step, let's start with a genuine, high quality, unique Eustis drawing. And so here's the wireframe. Here's the layout for the website we're going to make. I drew this on a piece of paper, as you may be able to tell, that is sitting right here. And this will just kind of give us exactly production quality. We have hand-drawn art styles in our lecture. This is the future. Link to resume. So, I think one of the important things that we want to teach you about in kind of this web dev stuff is how you would make a website for yourself, maybe a portfolio website. And so, we're just going to run through a quick 30-minute example on this. And so hopefully, this will kind of show you how easy it can be. Okay, so step one, let's just plan out the HTML structure. There's no right way to do this. It just comes with experience. The profile. I know, right? It is actually pretty good, huh? And so the thing I see first when I look at this is there's two major sections. There's this kind of top section and there's this bottom section. And so we'll write that out first. Ping Daniel or Drashika, and they'll make it an emote. I actually really do like that one. Next, we'll look at kind of subsections in here. And so, there's the profile picture area, there's this kind of header area, there's the resume area, and then there's kind of these projects here. And so that'll be a section. And then some of these have sections in those. So this header area has two, the name and the short bio. Projects has project 1 and project 2. And so those can be sections. Nice. And so now we have this nice little layout here. So let's start translating this into actual HTML. We'll start again with the top two sections. We'll make a top block and a bottom block with divs. Let's expand that. We want the three sections in the top: profile picture, header, resume. And then in the bottom block, we just kind of have the wrapper for that other part. You can have directly nested divs like this. It is totally 100% fine, and actually is super useful for getting spacing and stuff right. And then we'll set this kind of final layer of divs. And so in the header div, we'll make name and bio. In the project wrapper, we'll make project 1 and project 2. We'll give these the class project as well in case we want to adjust both of these at the same time. Nice. So we've made the kind of core of our HTML document so far. Let's just start to actually populate it. And so what I'll do is for the div, for the name part, I'll just fill in my name. For the bio, I use this thing called lorem ipsum, which is just filler text. There's nothing fancy about it. It's Latin, but it's broken Latin, and so it doesn't actually even mean anything. Basically, a lot of web development people just use it to put text where text will eventually be, but we don't have the text yet. In my case, I'm not going to write a full bio and project descriptions. So instead, I just use lorem ipsum for now. And so we'll populate all of these, and it doesn't exactly look like our drawing, does it? There's not really a lot of structure to it, huh? Maybe we kind of get the order. The picture is not existent. Technically, in the original thing, the picture was existent. This screenshot doesn't show the picture. It's a mess because the picture is huge, is what I'll say. So I took it out for the screenshot, but just know it's a mess. So what went wrong? Well, we have what the website says. A mysteriously hireable resume. We have what the website says, but we don't actually have how the website should look, right? And so we actually need to write that, believe it or not. First thing we'll do is just link a CSS page to the sheet, right? That's kind of important. And let's talk about some steps, right? So this is what we have. And what do we need to do? Let's make the entire top part take up the correct height. That was funny. Discord, Twitch chat, so good. We'll make the entire top part take up the correct height. We'll position the profile picture to the. This should say left. I typoed, my mistake. So profile picture on the left. Make the image actually fit in that. Put the text, the header part, in the center, and put the resume part on the right. And so if we go back here, basically we're just kind of building out this first top part here. So let's first make the top part take up the correct height. And so for this, we say top block, which is the ID, height 25%. And that's 25% of the viewport or 25% of your window. It really is that simple. So next, we'll position the profile picture to the right. Any ideas? How to position the profile picture to the right? Or this should say left. Again, I'd change it, but I'm not going to. This says left. So how do we put the profile picture to the left and make the stuff go to the right of it? I don't really know. So we'll use Stack Overflow. We Google, ooh, I almost knocked my computer over. We'll Google put our div to the right of another div. We immediately get, Flexbox. We're not talking about Flexbox. Text align, that would work for text, but this isn't necessarily text. So we'll Google attach a div to the right of another div. We'll find a Stack Overflow page and we'll copy and paste the code. Because that's what we do. That is what we do. Right? And what we get is we're supposed to use this float left and display inline block. And that's really it. Close, amen, close. I believe float right would actually work as well. But you have to be a little bit more careful because then if it's too long, things will start to explode. And we'll define the width to be 20%. This is arbitrary. I felt like 20% was a good number. My drawing looked like about 20%, maybe a little bit less. I didn't count the squares, so. And additionally, we'll make the image fit in the div, and so we'll make it take up 95% of that div, which is 20% of the width and 15, or what do we put? 25% of the height. We only do 95% because I like to have a little spacing. There's other ways to do this spacing. And I think it looks cool, so we'll add border radius. There's no other reason. Google stuff that looks cool in CSS and have fun with it. Next, we'll position the text in the center. And this isn't text align center. This is actually putting the div in the middle. How do we do this? Well, same Stack Overflow. We're putting the div to the right of another div. Same copy and paste. We'll push it to the left a little bit, or push it from the left a little bit. And then we define the width to be 65%, just because I felt like that was right with the correct spacing. Finally, we'll position the resume div to the right and make the image fit in the div. Any ideas? How should we do this? We have a div to the left, and we want a div to the right. Same Stack Overflow post as always. So copy and paste the code from the same Stack Overflow. Additionally, we'll have these two things here, right 0, which means push this all the way against the right, and then width 10%. I felt like 10% was a good number, and so I made it 10%. And then for the resume image, we just make it take up the full thing with height 100%, width 100%. If you don't use these, what it'll do is it'll use the default resolution of the image itself, and so it'll kind of be full resolution. And that can cause problems because in my case, the image was way bigger than this, and so then it exploded and pushed things around and made my life hard. So how's it look? Wonderful, right? We have this top bar almost fully functional. We have a nice profile picture on the left here, me at the Bukhansan National Park, right near the summit. It was great. We have the header here. This was like last weekend, so I know. It was so great. Stay after lecture for pictures. Social hour. We have the header here, which looks wonderful. It's a nice, width. It has nice spacing in between everything. And then we have a little picture of my resume here. The reason this is cropped is actually my own fault. The image itself is cropped that I put there, and so that is not the fault of CSS. That is the fault of me doing a bad job editing and being too lazy to put white spacing on the top and bottom. So worry not. Unfortunately, we haven't done projects yet, though they don't look too bad. So let's work on the bottom. What do we need to do? Well, we'll make projects big and we'll center it. We'll give the whole thing kind of a light gray background because I think that looks cool. And we'll make the projects category, the projects class, look good and be visually separable. Yeah, truly. W3 Schools, MDN, and Stack Overflow are the holy Bible of web dev. So let's make projects big and center it. So first, make projects big. Next, center it. And you don't know how to center it? Google center text CSS, and you will get this, text align center. And then we'll give the whole thing a light background. I just used kind of an off-white F5, F5, F5. No reason. Felt like it looked good. We'll make the projects look good as well. We'll make the font size a little bit bigger. We'll add some padding to separate them from each other. Oh, now I'm getting confused between margin and padding. We'll add some padding to separate them from themselves. We'll add the background color to be a little bit of a darker a beige. We'll add some margin to separate them from each other. And then I'm a big fan of box shadow. I think it's super cheesy and super fun to use, and so we'll throw that in there too. And so how does it look? Oh. It's like they're coming out from the page. Look at my projects. Lorem ipsum dolor sit emet, Yeah, so it looks pretty good. Oh, that would have been good. I didn't think of that. Yeah, so, great stuff so far. I'm still not perfectly happy with it. This top part needs to be cleaned up a little bit, and so let's do that. Let's make my name bigger and bolder. Let's change the background to be darker than the bottom, and let's make the resume actually download my resume. And so first, we make my name big and bold, font size 60, font weight bold. Alternatively, you can do font weight bolder. It's beige, all right? Next, we'll change the background of the top to be darker. We already had this height 25, and so we just changed the background color to be, I chose E000, really arbitrary choices. And then finally, we'll make the resume image download my resume. And the way we do this is, again, with an anchor tag. And so we're kind of back to HTML land. We'll make it download with this download name. And then this is the actual file name itself. And we'll wrap the image tag in an A tag. So the content of the anchor tag is the image. When you click on the image, it downloads the file. So here we go. Wow, I went too fast. I thought this lecture was going to be way too long because it was more slides than normal, but we're actually pretty good on time. Maybe because I was trying to go so fast. So what other changes may look nice? This isn't a rhetorical question. Let's talk about some changes that may look nice. So give a suggestion or two in Twitch chat. It can be a big change, it can be a small change, it can be, I want to make another div here. Dark mode, Comic Sans font. Hovering over a profile pic will enlarge the pic. These are good. A button instead of a blurred image for resume. Well, I like the, yeah. I was going to defend it. Sure. Putting on a new profile pic. Rude. Okay, I like dark mode. So 10% extra credit for the first person to tell me how I may be able to implement dark mode on my website quickly and easily. And I have a good idea for this one. So let's hear it. Let's hear it. Let's get a little bit more specific than that, everybody. Where do we need to put that? I mean, if we put that, everywhere, then you're not going to be able to see any of the text, right? There we go. I like the enthusiasm with linking a dark mode how-to. I like that. The question is how to implement dark mode. Dark mode on, use Google Stack Overflow. Okay, let's see. Who do I think won? Who do I think won? Yeah, I'll give it to Nathan. He was the first person to mention anything. I just feel like it's close enough, Google one, though. Honorable or Alex, I may see if I can fit you in there too. I like the linking that. I'm actually if that link is good, if it would work, then I'll give you extra credit as well. Don't know. JavaScript's next lecture, my friend. No spoilers. So speaking of which, we've made a static page. It doesn't have any JavaScript, and so when we load this web page, everybody sees the same thing, and the page doesn't actually do anything. And, from experience, this isn't necessarily how things work, right? If you load your Gmail, you do not see the same Gmail as me because there's other information that's passed in. We have to get our own emails, right? That web page is dynamically generated. So next, we're going to make the page do something. And that's going to be next lecture. And then we're going to make the page dynamically generated. And that's going to be, some of the back-end stuff. And then finally, we'll actually create a database and be passing live information, or at least request live information, to be passed onto this website. And so, again, I want to reiterate, it's really my hope that, you're kind of following along with these, maybe even, working in your own repo. Obviously, the homeworks are kind of here to help guide you along as well. But, work in your own repo and make a portfolio website, right? I have my own, many other people have their own, and being able to kind of do it by hand gives you so much more freedom than, getting some boilerplate code online. I don't have it functional right now, but I'll give you all kind of a sneak peek of mine. This is my one right now. This is boilerplate code that I only edited. I didn't really write. You can see it's scarily similar to the layout I came up with, but this is one that I'm kind of doing myself. And so this is actually, a rendering of what will eventually be a business card in the browser. And when you spin this business card around, it'll display information about myself. And I spent, an ungodly amount of time making it so that every time you refresh this page, it zooms in at a new fun angle. Um, yeah, and that's the true production quality. So again, it really is my hope that you're kind of following along with lecture, and having fun with it. I think web dev is super great. Obviously, my background is in computer vision, but before that, I really was web dev, and it's really one of the most valuable tools that I know. I am by no means an art major. Okay, well, this lecture actually went by a lot faster than I think. It was 100 slides, believe it or not, that we just went through. So I think I'll take the last couple minutes here to review because we just covered a ton of content. So apologies if I went really fast. I was really worried about not finishing. And since this is a new lecture, it's a little bit harder to pace myself, right? I'm not really sure how long it'll always take. So again, we talked about HTML and CSS. We introduced what front end and back end are in the three major categories of front end: what the website says, HTML; how the website looks, CSS; and then what the website does, which is going to be JavaScript on Thursday. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry if I went too fast, everybody. Slow me down during lecture next time. I promise I won't. I won't feel bad. So front end can be a ton of stuff, but I'm going to teach you how to go from that drawing to that form. Obviously, we can see we did that. The first part was HTML. HTML is a markup language. It doesn't run. It's only like a text file that the browser reads. HTML uses tags to build elements. Tags are started and ended by the angle brackets. And then the opening tag will say, angle bracket, tag name, angle bracket, and then the closing tag will be the same with a slash as well to close it. Inside of that tag, inside those two tags, you call it a element, or you put the content, and that whole thing together you call an element. The three most important tags, I'll say, is the HTML tag, which is everything; the head tag, which is all of the metadata, which is data about the HTML document, like page titles. We saw style tags, linking to CSS pages. Is there a homework? Yes, there is a homework for this lecture. And it'll also touch on stuff for next lecture, so if you don't know how to do anything, wait for next lecture. But you should be able to get, I think, the majority, if not all of it done by this lecture. And that'll be released in 15 minutes at 8 o'clock. So as well as author, description, keywords, stuff like that, and scripts for the web page, so JavaScript. What goes in the body element? Everything else, right? All of the document stuff that we want to read and show to the user. Elements are either inline or blocks. Use W3 schools and MDN and Stack Overflow to help you do anything ever. P tags can be used for simple paragraphs. They're block level. H tags can be used for headings. Let me mention, I forgot to mention this. In the code that we were writing here for our example, I used a lot of divs, and almost exclusively divs if you look, and everything basically had an ID. You don't have to give everything an ID, and not everything has to be a div. I just did that because it's fast and easy to understand. So, for certain things like the name, I probably should have made that like an H1 tag. But, continuing. You have A tags, which are used for links, and some tags need attributes like the A tag. An example of this is href, which tells the A tag where to go. Image tag has the src attribute and lets you put in an image. And then div and span are kind of your moldable arbitrary divisions to be whatever you want using CSS. Two special attributes that most elements can use are ID and class, and they allow you to apply CSS a little bit easier to those elements, or a little bit more specifically, maybe we should say. And so we can look here of an example for that. Div class equals red, ID equals div1, class equals blue, div2, etc., etc. Cascading style sheets are how we actually change what the page looks like. It can change things a ton. We use this format of selector attribute value. If you want to select elements, you just put the tag name. If you want to select classes, you preface the class name with a period. And if you want to select an ID, you preface it with a £. You can tie these together so you can have all of the div elements with the sum class. This is opposed to if you just did the sum class, in which case if you had, a span tag with the sum class, that would this CSS would be applied to that as well. And then we just did some awesome examples of CSS and HTML and applying those to pages. We linked CSS into pages using internal or external style sheets. And we went through building a site kind of from the ground up, one piece at a time. And I promise we really did go through everything here. The only exception of the stuff I didn't show you was actually linking the images here, which are 2 image tags. So spoiler alert. And in the future, we'll make this dynamic. Okay. Well, we have just about the end of lecture now. Again, apologies if I went a little bit fast in the beginning. I was, with these new lectures, I was a little bit worried. This was a little bit of a newer format too, kind of with maybe more heavy on example stuff. Please let me know what you thought of this. Obviously, this class is completely student run. I'm always open to feedback. I liked this. Maybe you should have focused more on this. Eustis, please go slower. All of that is, I'd love to hear it, really. I'm here to teach you all. And you're here to teach me as well. And so, just let me know. Thank you all for coming to the lecture, and come to social hours after this if you're interested in talking. So yeah, I'll see you all around, and bye-bye.